Margaret sat in her kitchen, stirring her tea for far longer than it needed. The sound of the spoon clinking against the ceramic mug was the only sound in the house. At 72, she had grown used to the silence. The cottage had once been full of laughter, the hum of conversation, the scent of roast dinners in the oven, and the rustling of newspaper pages being turned by her late husband, Charles. Now it was just her and the ticking of the clock on the wall. 11 years had passed since Charles died. At first, she thought the emptiness would consume her. The days were long and heavy. She had friends, of course. Good ones. But over time, the visits had become less frequent. People moved on. And Margaret, in a quiet way, chose to stay behind. Not just in her home, but in a version of the world that no longer existed. It had been weeks since she'd left the house. She didn't see the point. Her daughter called sometimes, and her son sent pictures of his own children, but they were far away, in miles and in life. Margaret's world had shrunk down to her porch, her kitchen, her armchair, and the memories that played like reruns in her mind. That morning, though, something stirred. It began when she dropped her favorite mug. It shattered into 3 clean pieces on the tiled floor. For a moment she just stared at it. And then, without knowing why, she laughed. A strange, full, unexpected laugh that echoed in the empty kitchen. She picked up the pieces and instead of throwing them out, set them on the windowsill like a little sculpture. She opened a drawer she hadn't looked in for years. Inside were old photographs, a set of pastels she had forgotten she owned, and a tiny notebook with blank pages. She ran her fingers over them as if they were relics. She carried them to the living room, sat by the window, and began to sketch. It wasn't perfect. Her hands trembled a bit. But it didn't matter. Days passed, and Margaret began to find moments where the silence was not a punishment, but a canvas. She painted sunflowers from her garden, the chipped porch swing, and even the old wooden spoon Charles had once tried to whittle into a fork. She laughed again. Then one evening, as she walked past her hallway mirror, she paused. She had been wearing an old robe. It was worn, soft, and comfortable. But the light from the hallway window lit her reflection in a way that made her stop. She didn't see an old woman. She saw herself, Margaret. Not someone's wife, not someone's mother, but someone who had survived grief, who had learned to sit with herself, who was beginning to feel again. That moment, though simple, became the one she couldn't forget. She placed her hand against the mirror, whispered thank you to the woman staring back, and that night, she dreamt in color for the first time in years. Soon she started going out again. Just for walks at first. Then to the small art shop downtown where she picked up new brushes. A young woman behind the counter asked about her work, and Margaret, blushing slightly, admitted she painted for herself. The woman smiled and told her about an upcoming community exhibit. Margaret hesitated. But something, maybe that laugh from the kitchen, maybe that mirror moment, urged her forward. 2 weeks later, her sunflower piece hung quietly on the wall beside works from artists half her age. No one pointed or gasped, but they stopped. They looked. And Margaret stood nearby, quietly sipping tea from a paper cup, watching them see her, really see her. The exhibit ended, but Margaret kept painting. She mailed a small painting to her daughter, who called her in tears, saying it reminded her of childhood. Her son requested a piece for his office. She began journaling too. Stories, thoughts, dreams. Some days were still heavy, but they were no longer empty. She still lived alone. The house was still quiet. But now it hummed, breathed. It was full of her. Full of color, reflection, and presence. Margaret had not gone back in time. She had moved forward step by step, tear by tear, brushstroke by brushstroke. And every now and then, she would look in the mirror again. Sometimes fully dressed, sometimes not. Not to criticize or mourn, but to honor. To smile at the woman who stayed. The woman who bloomed in silence.